Picture a city block no bigger than a soccer pitch, threaded with alleys so narrow you can stretch out your arms and brush both walls at once. Now picture nearly 300 bars packed inside that single block, some with room for only 5 stools, glowing with paper lanterns and hand-painted signs in a dozen colors, tucked into buildings that have stood since the rubble of the Second World War was still warm. This is one of the last corners of Tokyo where the city hasn't been torn down, polished, and rebuilt taller. And tonight, we're stepping into it. Welcome to Walking Tour of Japan, a podcast dedicated to bringing you a new adventure somewhere in Japan with every episode. Each week we'll travel to a different destination, from ancient temples and stunning gardens to fascinating cities, historic landmarks and hidden gems tucked away across this incredible country. If you're gearing up for your own trip, head over to northstartravelers.com, where you'll find gear recommendations to help you travel smarter, plus a full list of our other podcast shows covering destinations around the world. If you love discovering new places and planning your next adventure, follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leaving a positive review goes a long way in helping others find it. Now let's explore Japan. You're standing on Yasukuni-dori, the wide avenue that cuts straight through Shinjuku. Neon signs stacked 3 and 4 stories high reflecting off the pavement around you. Just off this avenue, behind an unassuming archway, lies a tangle of 6 alleys that locals call Golden Gai, Golden Block. From where you're standing, it doesn't look like much. A low cluster of 2-story wooden buildings hemmed in by the high-rises of modern Shinjuku, almost apologetic in how small it is. But step through that archway and you cross into a part of Tokyo that has refused, for 80 years, to become anything other than what it already is. The story of this place begins in the rubble of 1945. When the war ended, the area just outside Shinjuku Station's east exit turned into a black market almost overnight. Stalls selling rice, sugar, cigarettes, anything that could be scavenged or smuggled, run by people with nothing left to lose. The occupying authorities shut that market down a few years later, but the merchants didn't disappear. They simply drifted a little farther from the station to the empty, bombed-out lots where you're standing right now. Through the early 1950s, this corner of Shinjuku became something rougher still, a red light district operating in a legal gray zone. That changed in 1958 when a new national law forced those businesses to close almost overnight. What rose in their place is what gives this neighborhood its real character. Tiny drinking establishments no bigger than a closet that needed almost no capital to open. An owner could rent a storefront 6 feet wide, build a counter for 5 stools, and be open for business by the weekend. As you walk into the first alley, notice how every building presses right up against its neighbor. Wood siding worn, soft, and gray, signs stacked one on top of another all the way up to the second floor. By the 1960s and 70s, these tiny rooms had become something nobody would have predicted, a magnet for Tokyo's writers, editors, filmmakers, and actors. Drinks were cheap, the rooms were small enough that you ended up talking to strangers whether you wanted to or not, and a kind of underground creative culture took root here. The sort of place where a struggling novelist might end up arguing about cinema with the director who just made it. That reputation never really faded. Even now, you'll find bars themed entirely around old film posters, jazz records, or punk flyers, each one a tiny shrine to whatever its owner loves most. Turn the corner ahead of you, and you'll pass a narrow storefront with movie stills taped inside the window and a small hand-painted sign above the door. This is exactly the kind of place that earned this district its reputation among film people. A single room covered floor to ceiling in posters and photographs, opened decades ago by a former film student who never really left the world of cinema behind. It's the type of bar where, if the night is slow and you strike up the right conversation, you might find yourself talking shop with someone who actually works in the industry. Keep walking, and the alley narrows even further. Lanterns hung low enough that you'll want to duck under a few of them. Here's a practical tip worth knowing before you go any farther. Come on a weekday evening, ideally between 9 and midnight, if you want to actually experience these alleys rather than just being swept through them. Weekend nights have more energy, but they're also crowded enough that you'll spend more time waiting outside than talking to anyone inside. And bring cash. Nearly every bar in this district is cash only, a holdover from an era before card machines existed, and one nobody here has felt much urgency to change. As you continue forward, you'll notice some doors have small signs taped to them, English words like members only or regulars only. This isn't unfriendliness so much as simple math. When a room holds 5 people, the owner has to decide whether those 5 seats go to regulars who'll stay all night or to visitors who might have one drink and move on. Don't take it personally. For every door like that, there are a dozen more, just a few steps away with an English menu taped in the window, and a bartender who will wave you in with a smile. Up ahead on your left, you'll pass a storefront with a chandelier visible through the window and what might be a mounted deer head on the far wall. Rumor has it the building once operated as something rather different before it became a bar, and the current owners have leaned into that slightly seedy glamour ever since. It's one of the larger spots in the district, spanning 2 floors with a small rooftop terrace tucked above, which is a genuine rarity in a neighborhood where most buildings don't have room to spare for a staircase, let alone a roof deck. Turning down the next lane, you'll catch the smell of broth and grilled garlic drifting down from somewhere above you. Climb the steep, narrow staircase here, and you'll find one of this district's most beloved late-night institutions. A ramen counter with barely 10 seats, built around a broth made by simmering dried sardines for half a day until it turns dark, rich, and intensely savory. It's open around the clock every day of the year, which makes it the unofficial finish line for a long night of bar hopping through these alleys. More on that in just a moment. As you make your way deeper into the district, take a moment to look up. The buildings lean slightly into each other, wires crisscross overhead in loose tangles, and somewhere a window air conditioner hums against the quiet. This entire neighborhood almost didn't survive into the present day. During the late 1980s, at the height of Japan's economic bubble, developers began circling this land, recognizing that a few hundred tiny bars sat on real estate that could be worth a fortune if cleared and rebuilt. Property owners and longtime residents banded together to fight the redevelopment block by block, and they won, but the victory came at a cost. When the bubble burst in the early 1990s, the neighborhood that had just fended off the bulldozers found itself half empty, with shuttered storefronts and a noticeably aging crowd of regulars. It took a new generation of owners, arriving in the early 2000s with fresh ideas and a willingness to welcome outsiders, including a growing number of visitors from abroad, to bring these alleys back to life. Continue along the lane as it bends to the right, and you'll find yourself in a slightly wider stretch where a handful of bars share an open common stoop. A good spot to pause, get your bearings, and notice how different each doorway looks from the next. Some are draped in red lanterns, others lit by a single bare bulb, a few decorated with nothing more than a hand-lettered sign and a string of fairy lights. Here's a second practical tip. Look for a small paper sign in the window listing prices, particularly any seating charge. Most bars ask somewhere between 500 and 1,000 yen just to sit down on top of whatever you order, and seeing that listed clearly is usually a good sign you found a place used to welcoming visitors. As you near the far edge of the district, the alley widens slightly, the buildings thin out, and the noise of Shinjuku's wider street starts to filter back in. Before you step back into that noise, one last tip. If you want to see this neighborhood at its most photogenic, come just after sunset on a weeknight, when the lanterns are lit but the crowds haven't built up yet. The contrast between the warm glow of the alleys and the cool blue of early evening is something you won't get later in the night. Once everything is lit by neon and packed with people, take a last look back down the lane you've just walked. In a city famous for tearing itself down and rebuilding every few decades, taller and shinier each time, this 6-alley pocket of wooden buildings has somehow stayed almost exactly as it was. Not because nobody wanted to change it, but because enough people fought to keep it exactly as it is. What you're standing in isn't a recreation or a theme park version of old Tokyo. It's the real thing, still operating, still pouring drinks, still standing on the same patch of ground it claimed out of the rubble 8 decades ago. If you're hungry after all that walking, head back to that steep staircase a few lanes in. The ramen counter at the top is known for its intensely savory dried sardine broth and stays open 24 hours a day, every day of the year. A short walk south, near the station's west side, you'll find a tangle of yakitori alleys where a stand-up soba counter called Kameya serves a fast, inexpensive bowl of tempura soba, a perfect way to start or end a night of bar hopping. Just a few minutes walk from these alleys sits Hanazono Shrine, a quiet Shinto shrine with roots stretching back centuries, tucked behind a stone gate and somehow untouched by the chaos surrounding it. A good spot to catch your breath between bars. A bit further south and west, those yakitori alleys we just mentioned, known as Omoide Yokocho or Memory Lane, are a tangle of roughly 60 tiny stalls squeezed beneath the train tracks near the station's west exit, where smoke and charcoal drift through passages even narrower than the ones you just walked. Heading the other direction into Kabukicho, Tokyo's biggest entertainment district, you'll find a hotel tower with a giant animated Godzilla head looming over the street below, equal parts absurd and unmissable, especially after dark when it lights up and roars on the hour. And if you'd rather trade neon for greenery, Shinjuku Gyoen National Garden offers a sharp contrast nearby, a sprawling former imperial garden with traditional Japanese, French, and English-style sections, especially beautiful during cherry blossom season in spring. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Before you go, a few quick things. Subscribe so you never miss a destination, leave us a positive review to help others find the show, and share this episode with someone who loves exploring Japan. And if you're hungry for more adventures beyond Japan, visit northstartravelers.com to explore our other podcast shows and browse gear recommendations for wherever your next journey takes you. Your support means the world and keeps these adventures coming. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next walk.